Okay, let's turn our attention to adding an on-screen menu. Right now we have our little score pointing out just as a debug style in that purple font along the corner. We're going to actually work now to create a bit of an on-screen menu to properly display a score. We'll maybe add a health variable as well, and we'll display that along with a health progress bar. So that's done in Unreal Engine with a user widget. We get to design the screen, and then we can program some logic around that particular screen. So in our content browser, we're going to go into my content. I'm going to create a folder in here. I'm going to call it HUD for heads up display, just short for an on-screen menu. And in here, we're going to right click, and under user interface, we're going to use a widget blueprint. So user interface widget blueprint. We're going to pick user widget here, and we're going to say my main HUD. So opening this, we have a similar but somewhat different interface this time, where this is our design screen, and then we actually have a graph screen. You can see there's designer and graph. So the graph gives us the blueprint that we're used to. This designer gives us the visual layout. In Unreal Engine 5, we need to add a canvas panel here. Older versions of Unreal had this canvas panel present by default, and this represents the size and shape of your screen, and the system tries to auto size to reflect it. So if you're running a tablet that has a bit of an odd, like maybe it's a 16 by 10 or something, little square format, or the old 4 by 3 monitors, it'll try and do the adjustments with this parameter. But we're going to keep our design of the screen within this level. So I did a search for canvas here, and then just dragged out canvas panel. You can see there's a number of common items, so if I wanted to add a piece of text, I could drag the text out, drop it on here. I don't actually want this piece of text yet, so I'm going to delete it. In order to sort of help with the layout, we're going to add a couple of horizontal bounding boxes, and then we'll anchor our items inside those bounding boxes. So I can do a search here for a horizontal box and drag it out. And I can size this the way we want. I'm going to put a piece of text in here. And you notice down here we have the canvas panel. And then nested inside that is a horizontal box, and nested inside that is our text. With the horizontal box selected, you'll notice this flower at the top left corner. This is the anchor point. Just as a general rule of thumb, depending on what I'm doing, I usually try to keep stuff on the top half of the screen anchored to the top middle. And if I'm putting something in the bottom of the screen, I would choose the bottom middle to anchor it to. And what this means is that it's going to position this item that we just added here similarly to the top center of the screen, no matter what size your screen is or what dimensions your screen is. So it helps us control the layout dynamically. So right now this would simply say text block on the screen, and if I wanted to, I could say hello from HUD. Compiling and saving this, running it has no effect because we haven't actually called it yet. We're probably going to call this from the third-person character blueprint, and that way this menu appears every time the character's spawned, which means it'll appear for each level. If we added it to the level blueprint, it would only appear to the level. Having it on level blueprints might be useful if you had levels that were only menus, and we can talk about that separately. But for now, we're going to apply this to the user third-person character so that every time that character spawned, this HUD will be present. So we're going to go into content, into the third-person blueprint, and we're going to add the widget to the screen. And what we want to do is whenever this level is started or spawned, whenever the character spawned, we want to have this widget or menu added. So we're going to use the event begin play, and you can see there's already some code here from the template. So I'm just going to drag this back a little bit. We're going to stick in a sequence node. Just to keep it clean, I'm going to break this. I'm going to put sequence 1 to that. It doesn't matter on the sequence, it's just me visually not crossing these. And then up here, we'll add a reroute node. We're going to drag out from here, and we actually create a widget. And then we get to choose the class, and you can see there's this my main HUD is the class. This is a temporary intermediate step where we're going to store a reference to this in a variable. So I'm going to promote it to a variable. And we're going to call this main menu var, just so we know what it is. And you can see its type is menu. Type. I'm going to drag out from here, and we're going to add to viewport. Now you notice that in both cases I dragged out from the return value, and it auto-connected the execution pin for us. This should now create a new widget based on the my menu definitions that we set up, class that we set up. It's going to store a reference to it in a variable, and then it's going to actually add it to the active viewport. So now, when we play, we have this hello from HUD. So we're going to make a couple of changes to this. I tend to usually take this, so I'm going to take our text block, make sure text is highlighted. And we can set the color if we want here. I'm going to leave it as white. And under font, we should be able to set the size. Let's go with 32. And under outline here, I like to set a 2-point outline. And when we run here, you can just see it stands out a little bit better with that outline. So this actually is going to say hello from HUD. This is going to be the start to our scoring system. So it's going to say score, colon, and I'm going to purposely put the space in there. And then I'm going to set it to be left aligned horizontally. And I'm going to compile it. I'm going to add another piece of text to our horizontal box here. We're going to do the same treatment to it. 32 points, 2-point outline. And I'm going to call this score num. This is the one that's actually going to represent the score number. Oh, you know what? Let's just have it say 00. It'll be more representative. And you'll notice that each of these has a value, a name as well. So I'm going to call this score num. And I'm interested in naming this one a little bit differently because we're going to do some more work with it in a few minutes. For now, if we compile and save it, when we run, we can see we have score, and then we have that space, and then we have the 00 that we put in here. That was a hard-coded value, 00. So let's go and actually set this to reflect our score. If we think back to our third-person character, we had a variable called points that was tracking. Let's actually make a comment here first. Adds HUD to player screen. Okay, so we had a variable here that was tracking points. And here, just every tick, we were tracking and doing a debug style print. So this is where we're going to change this and get rid of this. In the HUD, we're going to highlight the number or the text that is just a piece of text that is going to be replaced by the value from that points variable. And here under content, where it says text and we've got the 00, you'll see there's an option for binding. This is where we get to bind a function to this particular value and replace it. So if I pick binding and say create binding, you can now see I've got a function called getScoreNum, and that's why I named the variable on the design tab the way I did. Remember here, I took the time to name this scoreNum so that when it created this function for us, it would be called getScoreNum as opposed to just getTextBlock. So what we're going to do here is cast to the third person character. As the third person character, we're going to get the points variable. So you can see get points here. And then we're going to connect it to the return node. It does a conversion to text for us because it's returning the integer that we stored in points. So the HUD's going to call this getScoreNum function. The input this is the input of it. It's going to cast to the third person character, get points, convert it to a piece of text, and return the text to the screen to replace this 00 that's here. So you may recall I hard-coded 00. It now says 0.
Ouch.
And if we go pick up a statue, it should change to 4.
Ouch.
And we now have a score of 4
Ouch.
and 8. Now every time this player gets instanced or started, we come back, a new layer spawned, this score value gets reset. And we've seen that before, and it's being reflected here in the
Ouch.
in the menu as well. So it looks like our score is working. So let's go and disable this little piece here. So I'm just going to alt click to remove that, and we're going to update this. We'll leave it in just as a reminder. Deactivated when built HUD. So we're no longer getting that little purple display running along the side. We have a proper score. So let's make the HUD a little more interesting. We could add a graphic down at the bottom here. So let's use the college logo just as a static image. So I could drag an image out, put it at the bottom here, size it however I would like. Now notice it's defaulting anchored to the top left, and I mentioned that I generally, if stuff's on the bottom half, would like to anchor it to the bottom left, and stuff on the top or bottom middle, and on the top I like to do the top middle. Now with this image selected, I can put an image in here, and as part of our HUD, let's go to content, starter content, sorry, not starter content, my content, HUD. We're going to add an image here. So if we bring up our game dev assets repo, we'll find in images there's this transparent GC logo transparent. So it's a transparent PNG. Just gets imported. If we open it automatically, you can see the image. The checkerboard behind it is the program's indication that it's a transparent GIF. It's not black, it's not gray, it's not checkerboard. It is transparent. In the HUD itself, if we highlight this image box, we can go to the brush setting, expand brush, and choose that GC logo transparent as the brush. You can see it's updated here. We can compile and save. Running it, you can now see the logo in the bottom corner. So let's go one step further and add a progress bar for health. So first we'll need to implement health. So in our third person character, let's create a variable called health. We'll set it up as a float. And as a float, we'll compile it. And as a float, we're going to initialize it to 100. Health starts at 100. And then we'll actually decrement it as bad things happen. So one of the items that we could do here, let's zoom out a little bit and move a couple of these pieces out of the way. So this is where we were displaying the score. And here we're pausing the game when the player's score gets over 13. We'll probably come back and change that again a little later on. What I'd like to do now is maybe decrement the player's health 1% for every 10 seconds of gameplay. And we want to actually display this health value on the screen. So let's start with the display part, then we'll come back and implement the decrement. So in here we had added a horizontal box. We could copy and paste it. And I only had the one item, so I'm going to undo that. We can also there, just a better selection and copy of it. And if it continues to give me grief selecting it here, we will just create a new one. So we used a horizontal box. I'm going to drag it about the same. I want to make sure it's referenced or anchored to the top center the same. And then what we did was we had added a couple of pieces of text here. So I'm going to add 2 pieces of text again. This one is just the prompt. It's going to say health colon and a space, and we're going to write justify it on the box. And then we're also going to add another piece of text here. And this one is going to be, for display purposes for now, we'll say 00. We want to make sure we set the font the same at 32 and 2 for the outline. And we'll probably want to do the same for this one, 32, 2. With this going, we should have our health displayed. And I'm going to want to make sure the numbers here are not anchored. Oh, see how I'm not nested here? I'm going to nest this inside. So now I'm nested inside, and when we play, this looks proper now. Okay, we've got these two set up. We need to, I'd like to name this one. So this is going to be our health num. Just like this one was the score num or points num. This is going to be health num. So highlight this under the bind function for the value. So context, the value, or content, the value here. Bind, we're going to create a new binding. You can see our other one. We're going to create a new binding, and it's going to be pretty much the same process. The third person character. We're going to get the health value, and we're going to return it. So it was saying 00, and it's now saying 100. Nothing's affecting the value of health, so it's just going to stay at 100. Gets player object health value and returns to HUD. That one works. This one works as well, and we should do the same here. Gets player object points and returns to HUD. So let's actually have something affect the player health now. And let's do that based on time. So in the third person character, we're just going to come down here off the event tick. We'll add a reroute node here. And we're going to start with a 10-second delay. So for 10 seconds, we're going to grab the health variable, and the decrement and increment variable will increase or decrease and store back in it. So we're simply going to do a decrement here. We don't have to get and set, we can just do a decrement. So we're going to decrement the float. We're going to add a reroute node here. Connect it back to the delay so that it's looping on us. And we should now have a time-based decrease for our health. Every 10 seconds, we should decrement health by 1%. So if we run here, wait 10 seconds, our value should change to 99. So now we have time-based urgency to our game. The player has to beat the game before their health gets to 0. We don't have a health test condition yet where it stops, but we have the countdown. Now, what's a health status without a red and green progress bar to show you the decreasing health bar? So let's go add a decreasing health bar. So in our designer, we're first going to move this number over a little bit. So I've got this character selected and it's automatically left aligned it here with the health. We're going to open up padding, and I'm going to give it left padding of 32-ish, and you can see it's moved it over. I might go 40. And that's just going to visually move it over a bit. I'm going to add a progress bar in the common items. We're going to grab a progress bar. I've dropped it in here. First thing is we want to make sure it's anchored to the same position, because if we don't, I'm going to manually slide this in here, line it up. First thing we're going to adjust is the Z order. We're going to move it to the back. So here under Z order, I'm going to say -1, so the numbers are on front and it's behind. And it looks like it's visually lined up, but watch when we compile and play here. No, they're actually not too bad. Usually they end up being a little more out of whack. But if we want the exact same layout that we got here, I want to make sure that with the progress bar highlighted, we want to make sure the anchor point is the same as the box, horizontal box, and now they match the exact same. So I am going to make this box a little taller and a little smaller. Okay, progress box. Let's give it a name. We're going to highlight it here. So I've got progress bar highlighted. You can see it in the outliner here and in the viewport. And I'm going to name it progress bar underscore health. Later on, we're going to bind a function to this as well. So we have the fill color. It says it's blue, but if you look at it, this seems to be gray. So the one we're interested in here is progress. And if we take the slider, we can slide it back and forth. And you can see it ranges from 0 to 1. And it's giving us this blue gray. So the first thing we want to do is remember that it's a 0 to 1 scale. And we're going to change the color to some kind of a green. So we've got a nice green. So now when we slide our slider, we've got green. And the bad part of the health bar should be red. So if we come up under style, I think we can pick it here in tint. We can give it a nice red. And then back under percent again, progress. We now have a red-green slider. We compile and save. Our slider's static right now, but it is in the right spot. It does have the red and green. And it is counting down. So I might choose to pad this out a little more. I padded it at 40. I might go 68 or something. Move it a little more to the middle. I could even go 80 maybe. There. Okay, we're going to go with 102. So with the progress bar highlighted, we had set the percent, or we tried sliding the percentage progress here manually, and we noted that it ranged 0 to 1. And as we adjusted that, we could change the slider. So what we want to do is bind it to a function that's going to set that. So if we do bind, create binding, and it's going to be pretty much our same process again. As to third person. We want to get health again. Notice the return here is a float, but it needs to be a float in the range of 0 to 1, not 0 to 100. Our health is stored out of 100. So we're going to do a division here, 100. So this is going to scale it out of 1. So this should cast to the third person player, get the health value, convert it to a value 0 to 1, and return this to the HUD, which is then going to use the 0 to 1 value to scale our progress bar. It's health from player object, scales to a 0 to 1 value, and returns to HUD. So what we expect to see now is a full green bar when we start, because health is 100, and then as it ticks down, 10 seconds in, we should get it dropping down, so you can just see the red appearing on the side there. And if we can bear with me while we wait another second, you will see 98, the red bar is getting a little bit bigger. We could, of course, decrement health faster or more frequently. That was just an arbitrary number. How do you know the comments were handwritten by me? They're completely misspelled. Decrement health by 1% every 10 seconds. So you could change how often health is decremented or how much is decremented. If you wanted to do more than one, instead of doing a decrement function, you could do a subtract, and you would get subtract and then set. So let's do a function here that will allow our fire blueprint to call a function to subtract 5% health every time our character runs through a fire. I'm going to save our character here. We're going to go to the function section, add a new function, and we're going to call it decrement health by 5. We might have different options to decrement health by different values, or we might choose to pass in an argument, but for now we'll just call this decrement health by 5, and we have the input to the function. We're actually going to get our health variable. We're going to drag out, we're going to subtract, and then we're going to drag out our health variable. We're going to set, and we're going to set the value here to 5. Subtracts 5% health when called. No return value from this function, it's just doing the subtraction and storing the value back in health. How or when are we going to call this? Well, we're going to open our fire blueprint and we're going to add a call to this function. So in our blueprints, under my content, blueprints, we're going to open our fire blueprint. And let's add a collision sphere, and every time the character runs through the collision sphere or capsule, we can call that function to decrement the health. So add, we're going to go with a collision, I think I said capsule, so we'll go with a collision capsule. And I'm going to right click. Remember, I can add them from here, or I could scroll down in the details, but add on component begin overlap. When the character first walks in here, I want to do something. I want to cast to the third person character. Normally you would see me get the player character here, but if I actually look at this particular capsule can tell me who the other character was, or who the actor was that crossed into this capsule. So this is the component itself, the capsule. This is the other actor, the actor that crossed into it. So I'm going to connect that to the object. So if this actor isn't, so if this actor is the player, this true pin gets executed. Notice there's a execution pin here for it's failed. So let's say a rolling stone or ball or something in our game rolled through the fire. It's not going to be the third person character. So this cast to the third person character would fail, and the true condition wouldn't get executed, and we wouldn't lose our points. So we've done a check to make sure that it's the third person character by doing this connection, as opposed to just getting the character the way I would normally. Okay, as a third person character, we want to call that decrement health, and you can now see we have decrement health by 5 as one of the options. So by adding this capsule, and if we'll look at it here in a second, comment decrements player health by 5% when they walk through the fire. If we go look at the visual representation of this, we'll probably want to adjust. So let's go with a left picture. I want to take the capsule and I'm going to move it up a little bit. And it looks to be sized reasonably well. If I walk through the center of the fire, I'm going to lose 5%. So let's see if this actually works for us. We've saved it. Let's come out into the game. And there we go. So every time we walk through the fire, we're losing 5% health. And this works for anywhere where we've deployed the fire. We can't walk up to that fire right now, but any of the fire BPs that we had deployed would now decrement our player health by 5. So we now have an interactive HUD that has a progress bar, represents health and the score. Get rid of that little debug printing. We can have a discussion about how you could use these to create layered menus, and in our next example we'll actually show you how to do a mini-map, which would be a good example or starting point for the idea of a layered menu with submenus.